All right, let's do this, everyone. Well, welcome, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the GIS Peer Success Webinar. This is episode number 19.
Oh.
Getting up there. Yeah, we're going to talk about remote management done today and in the future. I am your host, Toby Soto of GISsuccess.com, your guide to elevating you as a GIS leader. And we are back. We're kind of back from a hiatus since the GIS Leadership Summit back in July. That was like a 2-day summit with 10 presentations, and we had 900 registered users. Wow, where am I thinking? Registered attendees. So we felt really good about that, and we're so happy to be able to distribute so much value and content to you guys. And so we can't wait for 2021 for some additional summits coming up. So keep your eyes peeled. Anyway, so we had to take a little bit of time, had to decompress. And I had a couple contracts that needed some special attention as they were wrapping up. So just needed to take that time. And so anyways, any of those that have attended that GIS Leadership Summit, go ahead and post in the comments what you liked best about it so that other people can know. And we definitely have some new viewers to the webinar series. So first and foremost, welcome. And in the chat, please introduce yourself. Love to know who you are. And today's episode is sponsored by my GIS consulting company, Soto Media. I've been doing this for 2.5 years and just loving it. My company does provide GIS services and support for small and medium local governments and agencies. And you know what I really like about this is that I'm allowed to apply my 30 years of experience in public sector GIS in developing strategic plans, performing implementations and integrations, establishing workflows, and providing leadership development of all things. Could you believe it? To help really solve your problems. And so if you're looking for GIS support services, but you think your budget can't handle it, and you'll have to go to RFP, I got you covered. Yeah, I do. I got you covered. I have a low cost, low risk, high reward program that contains the purchase of 20 and 40 hour pre-block purchases of time. And a lot of my long-term service level agreements have actually started this way, where they just get 20 hours and we start and we work together. So how does this work for you? I'm basically an extension of your staff. And the best thing is that you can use me and be flexible in any way you see fit. And so that's the best thing about it. So for those of you who are interested, and I see some of you guys, I see you, and you're wanting immediate results with that less hassle, just email me at sotomediallc@gmail.com. So, all right, and we do have a second sponsor. This is awesome. It is the More Than Just Maps podcast by the Arista Texas chapter and hosted by Oli Powers, the GISP from city of Rockwall, Texas. She's also the chairperson and president of Arista Texas as well. And she interviews GIS leaders about their career paths and discusses other little GIS tidbits, like her previous podcast is on the GISP exam, which is really interesting because I never took that exam, and it kind of changed my little perspective on GISP in a way. So she's a friend of the program. She's a friend of the GIS Success community. And we even had this guy right here, this guy, Tim Nolan. Yep, he was on episode 1 and 2. So, it was very interesting. And we learned about Plot Boy, which I always wanted to know about.
and somehow they, they kept it going after that. I didn't crash or crush.
Yeah,
I didn't ruin it from the beginning.
It's done. So it's a good listen. It can be found wherever you find your favorite podcasts, on Apple and Spotify. And she never says this, but you know what? Subscribe to it. And with a little extra juice, give a review. I'm sure she'll really appreciate it. So,
she's good.
Yeah, it was really good. So back to the program. For those of you who have not attended this GIS Peer Success webinar in the past, it's basically a venue to allow us to roundtable a lot of discussions that happen in the hallways at conferences, and we're able to bring it to the masses through this open forum. And we like to invite, leaders like David here, and from all kinds of people from around the world to share their wisdom and ultimately elevate your GIS leadership skill set. And we have some great co-hosts here. We got Wade Kloos from the Department of Natural Resources in Utah, and Tim Nolan here from Collin County, Texas. And we do have our special guest, David Moss. He's the Deputy Director of GIS, Director of Data Management and GIS for Maricopa County, Arizona. And we'll get to him a little bit deeper in a minute, but a huge thank you for just showing up and taking your time out of the day to be with us. And for those of you who are watching the YouTube replay, don't forget to subscribe and hit the replay button so that you get notified of future videos that are to be released. And for those of you who are in the live audience, if you want to post your questions, use the Q&A box. And if you want to use chat, make sure you set it to all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, we won't see your chat. Quick announcement. I do want to thank the fine folks that put on the GeoFlow Summit this week for having me as their keynote address and talking about building an internal GIS powerhouse. And so really great venue, great people there. And again, I want to thank them for that. Any guys here have any announcements you want to make? Any GIS Day announcements? Anything going on?
Yeah, we're participating in a few GIS Day. I'll be in a talk next Monday with Texas GIS Day about remote interviewing, kind of the same topic we're going to talk to David about, just remote work. But this is more focused on remote interviewing and what techniques that candidates can use. And I'm also going to share some, sort of talk myself into it. I go, y'all really need to show off some election stuff. I've got some election stuff to show off. So I just sort of talked my way into a cultural session, which is going to be on Tuesday, same venue, Texas GIS Day. So I got a couple of things going. One, I was invited. The other, I sort of forced my way in.
Awesome. And those of you that are online, if you have a GIS Day event and you want to post that in chat, go for it and put a link, either a website or a Zoom link, so that others can participate. So before we introduce our special guest, I like to do this little segment. It's kind of our peer networking session. And basically what we do is we ask everyone, what are you doing now at work? And if you're comfortable enough, post that in chat and put your email. And this way, this helps develop connections to build your network and relationships, because chances are there's other people that are interested in what you're doing. And so that's, you can create that collaboration. So definitely in chat, just tell us what you're working on right now. And if you're comfortable, again, you don't have to, post your email address, and I'll take that information and also post it in our Slack channel so people can find that stuff. And it's a really great, useful resource. Meanwhile, I'm going to ask you, Wade, what are you doing now?
Well, I guess I'll just mention the relevant ones that I think are interesting. Believe it or not, I'm working on a telework agreement document for the Department of Natural Resources. Not necessarily in its creation. We've kind of worked through that already with leadership, but I am creating an e-sign version of that. The department uses Adobe e-sign. And as you can imagine, as it relates to working remotely and engaging a large workforce, it needs to be an electronic signature type of a document. There needs to be an established workflow and that includes all the participants responsible for reviewing an agreement with requirements, with a schedule, and all the other details that are pertinent to teleworking under an agreement, because it's not a right? Mm-hmm. It's a privilege to be able to do that. So I'm working on that. I spent the morning looking at and participating in a training class that the state of Utah puts out there for successful telework. I thought it would be somewhat relevant if I bolstered up my knowledge of what to expect and how the topic is approached. So I went ahead. Let's see, I've recently survived the negotiation with Esri on a new ELA for the Department of
Congratulations.
And moving
use the right term, you survived.
We survived, not without a little bit of back and forth, but good conversations, I think. So I'm moving that through the business case and the IT review. It's a large contract, and so it has to go through And then the last thing I'll mention that I think is somewhat relevant is I'm spending more of my time focusing on some of our divisions. We have 7 divisions inside of Department of Natural Resources to work with leadership in those divisions to talk about and define their business goals, their ambitious targets, the challenges that they have in reaching those kinds of targets, so that we can really identify a core business problem to focus on. Is it an IT issue? Is it just a business process that needs to be changed? And so we're working through those issues in order to really focus and leverage our time fixing a core business problem, not just all the superficial problems that any number of people in a division could spend time working on, but not really address a core problem. So we're really trying to pull back the covers on an operation and determine if the execution is something that requires IT, requires a GIS workflow enhancement, or a change in process so that you can avoid the cost and the money involved in necessarily a technology solution when you don't really have a technology problem.
Right.
So those are some of the things that I'm working on right now at the Department of Natural Resources. I'll turn it over to Tim. What is it that you're working on right now?
Okay, well, I mentioned we did kind of a lot of cool election stuff. I won't get too much into that. But one of the things that we had some CARES funds. We're a county. We have till the end of December to spend it. And so we hired a partner, a GIS consultant called Blue Raster, to do kind of COVID-related work, and I wanted to get our healthcare in with this and go, what do you want? I mean, we think, they don't know GIS and I don't know healthcare. So, let's all get together and talk it over. And one of the questions they asked is, has there been a big event that's occurred recently? And I'm like, well, yeah, we just had a big election, And so we're actually going to look, and we have all that election data. We know who you are, where you voted, and when you voted. And we also have all the case data of COVID cases. Is there a correlation? Can we go back? And so we're actually having the epidemiologist do this work with the consultant. And I'm really excited about the results. We were just kind of ironing that out this week, so we'll keep you posted on that. But that I hope to be a fruitful and interesting project that we're doing here in Collin County.
And we may have to have a webinar just on those results.
Maybe. We'll see.
Awesome. Well, I do want to introduce our special guest, David Moss. How are you? Deputy Director of Data Management GIS at Maricopa County, Arizona. Can you just give us a brief summary of your GIS career and maybe a special highlight there? Let everyone know about you.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say my career started in UNLV. I was going there in the Department of Transportation, and they had a work study for GIS, which I didn't know at the time. And it's kind of funny, and I'll tell you guys this quick story. And so I started there, and after the first 2 weeks, we would work with Clark County, like 3 days out of the week, and then we had to work at the back on campus. And after the first 2 weeks, the boss at Clark County told my boss at the Transportation Research Center, I don't think David's working out with this GIS stuff. He just cutting it. So, needless to say, after, going to school there for 3 years, I pretty much trained everybody that was there. And there's some people that still work in the Transportation Research Center that was interns with me that I trained when I was there, and then I moved on. So, but that was a funny story.
That's pretty good. Well, today's topic is remote management done today and in the future. And David, you come highly regarded. Adam Carnell really pumped you up at the GIS Leadership Summit about someone who really has a grip on leadership and leading your GIS there at the county. And we thought it would be great to have you on to really kind of discuss and pick your brain about remote management. And it's definitely no question that everyone has been affected by this. The pandemic has really changed things like, how we work, where we work, and when we work, and there's been advances in employment, by eliminating that request to work remotely, and getting the denials all the time from that, and dissolving the remote worker stigma that they aren't doing their work, and or they're not working enough, and dissolving the notion that nothing will get accomplished, and the dissolving the idea that someone has to be in the office for emergency needs. That was something that was always, in my wheelhouse, that someone always had to be in the office. Executives may want something, or the board or city council may want something. We need somebody here. But it's increased our collaboration. It's also increased our empathy among executives, managers, and staff. And there's also a segment of happier employees. It's not all, because not everyone's different. So sometimes this really works for them, but there's others that it doesn't. It is issues. And so there are a lot of issues that come out of this too, that we'd like to kind of address too, is like, the employee engagement. How are we accomplishing that? Through team building, or are we over communicating? Are we having death by teams and Zoom? Do we really need to have 3 Zooms a day just to make sure that things are working right? And then cross-organizational communication. There's many times where you're pre-meeting or post-meetings, and you just start having conversations with other department heads or other divisions, and you start spurring ideas. Well, how does that work now? Those communication channels aren't happening. Idea creation. You need a group of people to help create ideas, and if you're just one and alone, it becomes a little more difficult. And then on the HR side, it's like, well, how are we dealing with promotions? How are we dealing with hiring? Is our hiring procedures totally botched? And then salaries. If think about Silicon Valley, they're hiring people that are in different states, but do they still get Silicon Valley salaries? How is that going to work? And then ultimately, the mental health issues, everyone having to be home, sequestered, not having that engagement, not having that water cooler time, not having that, lunchtime engagement with staff, one-on-one, physical presence. There's a lot of mental health issues that are now coming out, based around this. So just want to open it up to you guys, what your kind of thoughts are about, some of the things that you have been seeing and dealing with, because you guys have staff. I don't have that anymore, but I do see what's happening amongst the community. So what's going on? How are you doing remote management in your department staff, and what is working well? Can you chime in on that there, David?
Yeah, well, one, I want to say, I appreciate you guys having me on today. Thank you for that. And when I do get the opportunity to talk about some of the things that we do, and I also get the opportunity to listen as well, I always learn new things and take nuggets from everybody else. So I'll let you guys know that over my 17 or so years, only a handful of these things have probably generated in my head, and it came to fruition. I learned them from other people that, that, hey, put me on and said, hey, you got to look at this and do that. And doing these type of sessions like this also helps me as well. So you always got to keep learning and advancing yourself for that. So for us, I would say the remote work, one, the biggest component I would say is the mental component. What people had an issue with, the most I saw is a lot of folks manage their teams as a team. And that worked when you're in the office, right? You say, hey, leave your personal issues or whatever you got going on at home, come into the office and I manage you as a team. And a lot of folks was managing folks like that and trying to help them be as one, as a team, and discounted all the personal items and things. So now that you're working from home, there is no filter. So if I'm on a Teams call and you just had a bad argument with your significant other, you're going to represent that on the Teams call more than likely to a certain degree, right? Also, that kind of driving into the workplace also gave you the opportunity to get yourself prepared for coming into work and having that separation. So now that you don't have that, you have to kind of manage each individual as themselves and then, go from there and take care of that, mental space in that aspect. We had people working more work from home. Like, they wasn't taking the normal breaks they would take. So then, of course, we were getting more hours, but then they always seemed to be burnt out, or they didn't seem like they were focusing as much. So we really put a focus on, all right, if you take a 10-minute walk in the morning, make sure you still do that now at home. Your lunch, turn off your electronics, have your full lunch, and do those things. Because if you look at it, right, before people get up at 6 a.m. to drive maybe an hour, 45 minutes to start their workday, well, you're not doing that no more. So people still get up at 6 a.m. and then they're like, start working. They get a breakfast and they got their breakfast sitting there while they, in their office, and they're eating while they're doing work. And it was like, okay, you're giving me more hours already, so don't take out the things that you were doing during the day in the office to keep yourself, sound and together and focused. Make sure you pay attention to that. So we really pushed that. And then I do know the county provided mental services and things like that maybe people wasn't taking advantage of. So we really focused in and pushed that and told people, hey, take advantage, talk to someone. Because you also have folks that lived alone. So they came into the office for that engagement. Now they're not getting that. And so now they may have anxiety because they also can't go nowhere else, right? So before they would have worked out at the gym, or they were getting that in interaction somewhere in other places. Now everything is locked down. You can't go anywhere and you're at home. So we really tried to focus in that area and tackle that as much as we could. I think that really helped us keep the team together and going during the time, initially during the initial start of COVID.
Yeah. What about you, Wade? What are you guys doing to perform your remote management, and what's working well from amongst your staff?
Well, I think how I want to kind of preface that comment is by saying that it was interesting that prior to COVID, the state of Utah was actually getting ready to deploy a huge telework initiative, and so, they had already given this a lot of thought on how they were going to go about doing this and why they were doing it. Interestingly, those benefits that we were hoping to receive as a state, I think, definitely came to fruition to some extent. I don't know if any of you've noticed, especially if you work in an area that gets a lot of smog, but we occasionally have an inversion layer here in Salt Lake. And quite honestly, during the winter, so March and sometimes April, it was completely beautiful. So there was a lack of pollution as a result of everybody working from home. So that was one benefit, was certainly the reduction in pollution. And I think that we can claim that we have seen incredible results from that. But we were also looking at it as a way to promote rural jobs in Utah. So enabling somebody, that doesn't live in Salt Lake, that lives remote and or very rural, as long as they have bandwidth, they could probably do this. And we're seeing an increase in the number of rural jobs that are made available by virtue of this remote work. So that's pretty a great benefit. The other thing the state of Utah was hoping to achieve was a reduction in facility expenses. Now, we already own our building, so the building's not getting any smaller. And while it's true we could turn off the lights in certain areas, there still may be those operational expenses. But boy, they had big plans to really reconfigure how offices are built into the future. You're going to see those common rooms that are, not dedicated to any individual, but it is just to basically promote this free space, I think is what we're basically calling it. So again, that's a pretty monumental shift. We're not quite, enveloped in that yet, but that's in there. And the other thing is that if the state promotes remote and telework, really what we're doing is we're increasing the benefits for state employees. Now, you probably have always heard that government, and especially state government, can't always match the private sector in terms of salary and compensation. So if you can, in fact, work from home as a state benefit, and especially in our IT-oriented jobs for GIS, This does qualify as one of those jobs that could pretty much happen just about anywhere. So if we can help retain our workforce by virtue of this kind of a benefit, then that's pretty good. So those were some of the benefits that the state of Utah was hoping to get by their telework. Now, when COVID happened, I think we have to be honest, that caught everybody off guard. And we implemented telework without some of the basic guardrails that they were hoping to deploy over time, such as the formal employee supervisor agreement on what are the guidelines that make telework happen in a way that is structured, not willy-nilly. And so, we've been 8 months into this working willy-nilly, and it's now catching up to us. We now are formalizing this work agreement. And so I think we're bringing more structure in, but so far so good. I think we've generally seen our service remain the same or get better, right? Because it's never acceptable for service to go down. But we have to be that much more in tune with what our staff is producing as an outcome. So we'll talk more about that, but that's kind of, I think, how I wanted to preface what Utah was doing, what we sought to do under our telework initiative, and then the COVID reality was everybody got thrown into it, and it just had to happen as it happened.
Yep.
How about you,
We're
Tim?
seeing a little bit of that too, Wade, with the prices of homes. A lot of folks want to move further out to live, but if you're going to work for the county, you got to drive in more than an hour. So by having that telework, then people can get those homes at cheaper cost and have that benefit and still provide that. So yeah, we are seeing some of that.
Yeah, quality of life issue is a big deal, and provided there's broadband, and of course this is helping us identify the last mile oriented projects that kind of need to work or need to be effective for remote workers. How about you, Tim?
We had a we were thrown into it just like everyone else back in March, and we actually split. I'm in the IT department for the county, so they split us in half. They wanted half people on site and the other half at home, and neither of the tween shall meet. You can't, if you're going to be at home, you stay at home, because if something happened to IT, we needed to keep IT going. GIS is part of IT here. And then we all were ordered back. So back in June, we're back in the office. So remote work was taboo before COVID. Then it was accepted during COVID, and then now it's taboo again. So it's really interested that, but one benefit out of this is that the technology like we're using here, Zoom or various, we use WebEx and things like that, is that we continue to use it. So we still try to social distance, even though we're in the office. We don't meet in person. We do everything by these kind of virtual calls. And we think we're going to keep doing that. Even if there's a vaccine and COVID's gone, I think that seems to be a really easy way to communicate without having to find a meeting space and all those kinds of things. We can just virtually meet, and that's pretty simple, and we're all used to it now. So there is a benefit from the technology, even though the remote work itself is a little bit on the taboo side here.
Yeah. Well, is that taboo coming down from executives?
Yes,
and
elected officials in this case.
Okay.
It's a political thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's always been.
David knows what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah. So we had some of that as well prior to that. Now what we're getting is what happens if somebody catches COVID and they know they caught it from work?
Yeah.
And then that person is hospitalized and somebody ends up passing away. So I think now it's starting to change, like, okay, well, they're kind of looking to give it to more of the departments to say, all right, your business, what part of can your people work from home, what part can be in the office. Because we do have some folks, in the office, but I think that's where it's going now. And I think there's going to be certain versions of it continue in the future. And then other folks, hopefully, like in your area, Tim, will start getting along and getting on that bandwagon as well. But I think at the end of the day, it's just a perception of, if you're not here, are you really working? And I'm like, well, if we wasn't working, you wouldn't be able to do anything.
Right.
It's like the result is, if we wasn't out working from home, the internet wouldn't be working, the network wouldn't be on, your servers wouldn't be there for your apps. So the fact that is working means we there. We are working. So the stuff we take for granted is available.
Right. Right. And now, how are you tracking that progress? How are you tracking what your staff is working on, and how are you tracking their progress that they're making on things?
Yeah, so what we was doing prior to COVID was we do like mini scrum meetings every morning. So the teams do the mini scrum meetings to say, okay, what's going on today? What you need from me? How can we, do these things and work? And then also I've always been big of setting deadlines. So even if our customers may not know when something is due, we set deadlines. So then that way when I call and say, I need you to work on something, you say, well, David, I got 4 or 5 projects due here. Where does yours fit and prioritize? So because we've been doing that as a leadership group, we just continued that when COVID was happening. And so I use my cell phone more than anything. I mean, I'm on Zoom from time to time, but I'm calling up the staff. I'm talking to them routinely like we were in the office, like I was doing before. So it wasn't a big leap from my guys. And I also tried, one of the things I was really cautious of is I didn't want to overdo it with COVID. So my wife has a story where, this is funny, she's been working for a year at her job in the school district, and she may see her boss like twice, once a day, but have a meeting maybe twice a week with her boss and the staff. And when she sees it, like just walk by, hey, how you doing? That's it. When COVID hit, she had way too many Zoom meetings with her boss to the point where she couldn't get no work done. She's like, dude, you didn't see me that much when I was in the office. Why you got me on the call way more now that I'm not in the office? So I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't getting in the way by having more meetings to make myself feel better. Because at the end of the day, if you hire great employees, they can't help but do the work because they are self-motivated. So therefore, I'm not the motivator for them to get the work done. And I think when people, that's what, I think there's a discount. I think a lot of maybe executive leadership and electeds believe that the workforce isn't as good as it is. So therefore, I got to put all these things in place to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah.
Well, do they feel like a lack of control?
I think it's a lack of control, and then just maybe also a lack of, you only hear the bad things, right? A lot of times you only hear the bad things, and we don't promote the good things we're doing in leadership and in management at the executive level. So when they hear things, it's like the bad things. So they're like, well, that's mostly what I hear. So therefore you need me to step in to make sure, you're getting the work done. And so I think a lot of that is the promotion, the things that we are doing really well. A lot of times we're like, hey, I don't have time to promote that because I got to do this else. And so I'm very big on promoting the things we do, awards, conferences, things like that, and then knowing what matters to them, elected. So then that way they understand that we are doing and we are the best at what we do. And I'm also very competitive. So that helps.
David, can I throw a question at you, David? You had mentioned about having kind of team meetings, but as the director of your program, how do you balance that of team communication as well as individual communication, perhaps necessary to ensure they're produced? An individual is one working well. How do you go about broaching the subject of the individual's production, mental state? Are they getting what they need? Are they firing on all cylinders, or do they have a problem? Because there's both team communication and individual. Can you give us a little bit of your take on that, how you do it?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. There are 2 different ones. So for me, it's I'm more of a natural, I would say, social butterfly in that sense. So it's a lot easier for me. And so prior to COVID, even during COVID, I had a lot of personal relationships with most of my staff. So I have about 18 folks, okay? And we're gonna be open and honest on the call. Not all of them are rock stars, okay? So, the ones that are rock stars that are great, I know them personally. Some of the ones that are not, I don't. I know them as much, but my supervisors do. And so a lot of times I will at least take once a week and call each one of them and just, say, how are you doing? What's going on? How are your kids doing? And so we may be on the phone for a good 30 minutes just talking about what's going on with them, not work related. And so from there, I can tell based on that, how they're doing, what's going on. Also, I've got to the point where I can tell with my high employees when something is bothering them on the call based on their tone and based on their emails. Like if I get a blunt email about a situation, I know Steve is having a rough day. So I make an opportunity to call Steve and say, Steve, what's going on? Do you need to vent? Do you need to let something out? So you always gotta have somebody to complain to. And I have that too. Kevin on my team, I complain to him about certain things that ain't going right in GIS and what I don't, because you gotta have that outlet. And so I try to make sure my folks have that outlet with me, and then I train my supervisors to do the same on their side. And so we really have that connection. Like we had one gentleman that was looking for a new house recently. And so I was talking about how you do the homeowner's inspection. And I had a guy that does it really well. So I gave it, and then we was at a team meeting. Somebody was like, hey, I know somebody does inspections very well over here. So we were all pitching in to help this guy buy his house on the team. And he appreciated that, but that was that extra level of, being a part of the team and that we all care about you as an individual, not just based on your production. And so what I've noticed over the years is when I do that, their production increases. So I don't have to worry about their production as much. If I worry about the individual as a person, the production takes care of itself.
Yep.
By doing those scrum meetings and setting those deadlines, that also helps us understand if they're meeting that, right? And we give pushback. We say, hey, we give you these deadlines and these 3 things. We ask for them to give us pushback because we also have a healthy level of conflict. A lot of people I know are very conflict. They don't like conflict. They shy away from it. But we have a healthy version of conflict. I can get on a call with 2 or 3 of my folks and say, I want to do this. And they will say, David, you are crazy. That ain't happening. Or they don't back it up with facts and this and that. So we'll have that. And that's one of the things I like the most is if I'm going off the reservation, my team will let me know and vice versa. So we do a good job of that.
Nice. So is there also the peer-to-peer accountability too? I mean, each person is relying on each other to make sure they do their job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have an admin team. We have an admin team of our high performers in the different groups and database architecture and the supervisor. And a lot of times when we do things, we'll meet with that group and say, here's our vision based on what we want to do. And then that group decides how we get it done. And they have to all agree. So when we first started this, I would have one person come to me after the meeting, David, I don't agree with the team. I want to do this. And I'm like, well, don't tell me. I'm like, you got to go against the admin team. That's what you want to do. Because if you're right and the admin team picks a different solution, then I'm going to approve the solution the team picked, and then y'all going to redo all the work because David Moss is the one doing the work. So you got to get that skill set to go convince your team members that's the right method. And if you guys come to me as a team, we're going to make it happen, and then we have each other's back. Because one thing I don't like, and I do see this in other teams, is one person that knew what to do couldn't convince everybody. So when it doesn't go well, that person then shines up and says, oh, I told you we shouldn't have done it, this and that. I'm like, we don't want to hear it because you working late nights like everybody else to fix it. So you best to get with the team now and make sure we don't do it the wrong way. Mm-hmm. Or your weekend is gone, and guess what? We don't pay overtime.
Exactly.
So that helps a lot with that accountability for that with the different teams.
Yeah. You have that too, don't you, Tim? Amongst your staff, having that peer-to-peer accountability.
Oh yeah. David alluded to kind of agile development, or, it sounds like y'all use Scrum there. We do this on our GIS team and our app dev team. We collaborate now, and that's another, with the tools now, we can just share screens very easily. We do a technique called mob programming. And I think it would benefit everybody. It's where everybody works on the same project until it's done. So it's up to people like David, to all of us to prioritize the work. And as long as they're working on the highest priority work, then nobody should be complaining about you know, because we're doing the #1 project. And if it takes a long time, it takes a long time, but at least it's still #1 until we're told otherwise. So, and I think because we collaborate in that way, you know, daily we're working together. So there is that accountability among each. And a lot of us have worked together for a while now, so we all, you know, kind of know each other pretty well.
I think that's one solution for success, is when you can, in fact, engage most of your staff on a common project, then through peer pressure, their performance is so much better. It's never about the admiration of the guy at the top or your department director that they'd go to war for, but really this is shoulder to shoulder camaraderie that builds better performance. That's really where you wind up, you know, your team is building allegiances to the people that they work with in the trenches. And that is what winds up producing perhaps some of the best results.
Yeah,
I agree.
And then when we do the conferences, I really have them, you know, do sessions and highlight the things they do with their peers. And so they want to be, they're competitive like me, right? So they're like, yeah, you know, they show off their work and their peers like, man, you're doing a great job at GIS. People also get jobs that way. Like, you know, I can't give a manager position to everybody on the team. Some of them want to be that. And I'm like, you know, my job is to make you have that opportunity, to help you so you have the opportunity to grow in your career, whether that's with me or not. But since I'm looking out for you as an individual, I want you to have that opportunity. So people work because they want to be there. But I tell people all the time, and I do this, I review every year how the year went. Did I get along well with my boss? Was it more days I wanted to go to the office than days I was like, man, I don't want to get up. And if those days are not, if I don't want to get up, outnumbers are more that I want to get in, that next year I'm not staying. And so I tell the same thing with my staff. I'm like, you gotta want to be here. You gotta love what you do. If you don't, then it's gonna be a struggle and you're not gonna perform as well as you want.
yeah. So this kind of rolls into promotions. Are you having to track things differently in order to help facilitate whenever there is a promotional opportunity?
So yes, to a certain degree. And so what I've learned, and I try to do the same thing with finance. So I learned all the gray areas in HR. That was the first thing I wanted to learn. It's like, what's allowed and what's kind of gray, which means it's allowed, really talk about it.
It doesn't go on emails.
That's what I'm talking about. I know you guys know what I'm talking about. So there's ways to promote people and to give people raises, but you got to be careful about it, right? You can't just go around like, I got 3 people and I'm going to do 3 people in 1 year. You know, you're setting up a red flag, okay? You got to strategically do it along with hiring from the outside and things like that, and make it to the point where if they didn't really like what you was doing, they're not going to say much because you're being careful about what you're doing. So they give you a pass. And so those are the things that I think you got to understand the rules of the game. And a lot of people don't like it. I get that a lot. I don't like this. We should change this. Well, you know, I would like to change a lot of things, but I'm not a board member and I don't have the you know, everybody on the board to do that. So I have to know the rules and know what I can get done to make my team successful. And so we do that. But at the end of the day, I will lose people, okay? And the way I look at it is if you guys are into college basketball, we're like Kentucky. You don't come to work for me to stay. You come to work for me to go to the NBA. Okay? So I embrace that. I embrace the fact that I'm not going to be able to pay you much, but what I do have is we do have our benefits. We have great leadership. We have great tools. You get a chance to play with new tools that you may not get a chance to play with else. And guess what? When you leave here, if you really want $20,000, $50,000 more, you can go get it. We're not going to stand in your way. And so by making that environment, I think people stay because of that. And then as promotions come up, I can negotiate that. But if I can't, I'll tell people right away, just give me enough time. I will write you a letter of recommendation. I'll help you get a job outside of my group because it helps GIS overall, right? That's the whole thing. We want to help GIS. I want to look back on my career and say, you know what, I did that.
Right.
I didn't stifle people because I couldn't keep them.
Yeah. And Tim, your process probably hasn't changed because you guys are now, back in office and kind of tabooed on the remote.
Yeah, but I mean, that came with consequences. We actually lost our web developer because of it. She did not want to come back to the office, and she resigned.
Yeah.
And so, as a result, we had to hire remotely. Right? We've hired 2 people since COVID hit. So we did remote interviews, and in fact, one of our developers were like, "So you mean I got to come in the office?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, you do." She was all ready to do it, but no, it's been a struggle, but I think, we're adapting. And like I said, we're still using the tools like remote hiring, without, trying to minimize as much contact as possible.
Yeah. Well, what is the new expectation then? As a new GIS newbie wants to get into, local government and get into employment, and they see everything that's been happening over, this year. And it's like, hey, maybe I can work remotely, even though my local hometown doesn't have a GIS position, but the next state over has something. Maybe I can work remotely. Is that possible? Or are we changed enough to allow that type of flexibility?
Well, not all of us are changed enough, but I think some are. I mean, you expand that further. Why not hire people in Asia and in Africa and just have 24-hour coverage, where the technology is there to do it. It's
Right.
just, how do you convince the powers that be that this is a good idea?
Right.
How are y'all doing it, David? I mean, is this now become the new normal for y'all, or do y'all look to come back to the office?
Right now, I would say they're looking to come back to the office at some point, right? Also, the policies are all designed like, well, if you work for Maricopa County or the city of Phoenix, you need to be in the city limits. So all the policies kind of was around you being in a certain location.
Mm-hmm.
So this is blowing that up, okay? So I do know they are looking at allowing us to telework, but the question is how far are they comfortable with you doing telework, right? Like, okay, are you comfortable with us staying in the state, outside the state? So I think as we move along, it'll become more and more changed as people realize that what we got going on with COVID is not going to go away. And what I mean by that is COVID ends up, we'll get a vaccination for that. But what about happens to the next COVID and the next? This is just the door to what we're going to have to deal with every few years. So we're not going to be able to totally say, well, we're going back to the new normal, but that's not going to happen, right? So I think once people start getting that and understanding that, okay, we got to account for this is benefiting us, then you'll see that change starting to happen. Just like what you see with Google or Facebook, where they're like, yeah, we ain't going to never have people come back. We just going to hire them and we have a small group in the office and that's it. So it usually takes us, government, a couple years once private adopts it for us to start totally taking account.
David, I got one other question. So now that you're remote, you've probably had gigantic projects, and the 2 I'm thinking of, your COVID support and your election. How did you do all that remotely?
Well, for the election one, I can't take credit for that one. That's something Gary Bellata.
Come on, take some credit.
No, they have their GIS group over there, and we worked with them well, but they kind of had a lot of that. So
okay.
For our COVID-19, I would say what really took was the fact for us was, it's one of those things where people was like, well, how did you do it? And I will tell you, it started 3 years prior. 3 years prior, when Esri came out with talking about web GIS and using web templates, half my team hated the web map builder. They hated it. They didn't want it. They was like, no, I don't like it, because we used to make custom apps. And people really liked the custom apps. But it would take us like 3 to 4 months. And then we never upgraded the version of JavaScript or something, or it took a while. And so it kind of came down to me working with them and say, look, guys, we can't always first, and then migrate, work with them, right? When you first come to us to build an app, that's the start of our journey. So therefore, we're going to be with you the whole time, so we can always adjust. And so when we really started adapting that and taking that on, that's what really helped us once COVID hit, and we was able to give all that support with that. But yeah, but at least half of my team was working on that constant, nonstop. Also, we had a great vendor relationship with other partners, EagleView, that really helped out. Vendor management, I think, is a lost art. And a lot of people only call on their vendor when they need help, and then they have an issue because they didn't respond fast enough. I'm like, if you're not working with them constantly, then yeah, they're not going to really want to assist you when everybody else is calling per se. So we did have a lot of that. And I would say also the relationships we had built with our public health department really helped us just doing GIS stuff. So they already knew of us. They trusted our level of work, the value we were bringing. So when it hit and they needed assistance, we literally had to wait. We had to say, hey, they were just figuring stuff out. And we had to say, look, don't pressure them too much. Just be there, be there, be there. And then once that floodgate opened, we were there, and then we was off to the races with them. So it was just that knowing of the timing has to be right. And sometimes people like, get them now. I'm like, dude, when that March 1st hit, I don't care if Jesus was selling a GIS app or handing it to them. They wasn't my, because they was inundated with so much. Mm-hmm. And so then it just took the time and us, being there helping them. But it also took us being at a lot of those meetings and just going back off and saying, I heard this, let's put together a POC and show them what it looks like and then get their buy-in. Versus, hey, let's have a meeting, let's talk about your requirements. We didn't have time, they didn't have time to do that. So a lot of the projects we did during COVID was us interpreting from a one-line sentence in a meeting that we heard what could help them. And then once they saw it, they were like, okay, let's get into it. And then we were able to turn those out very quickly.
Right. Nice.
So David, can I ask you a question from the chat group? David Murray, an old friend of mine, asked this question. With the very large revenue shortfalls we are all facing, how do we keep our GIS running smoothly? Could you take a stab at that?
Okay, so this is a one that's dear to my heart. All right. I don't want anybody to don't take this the wrong way. Okay, I'm gonna do my best to be politically correct in this aspect. COVID just highlighted the issues you were having financially. The issues was already there, okay? Because if you think about it, right? If you think about those departments that have the money, utility departments, transportation department, they still got money. They just decided to do other items with it. So what usually happens here is when COVID hit, people are starting to look at your groups. Everybody says, okay, who's providing me the most value? If you were on the chopping block for GIS, that means they didn't see the value previous to COVID. So that's the problem you're having. The problem you're having is that perception. The bad news is it's kind of hard to change it in the middle of everybody negotiating who should get the money. But what you can do is those groups that have the money, if you are not doing the work for them, that's where you need to start focusing. You get a lot of work in, and Wade brought this up before where he was working with his department to say, let's focus on the top priority projects and what's going to bring the biggest bang for the buck. I have some departments like that. I won't name any, but there's one particular department that always never has money, but they always want more work, and they usually go to the end of the pile because they don't have as much political clout and they don't have any money. So when I have to pick who gets priority, those groups don't get it first. That's just the nature of how you do it. It's not nothing personal. And so where I focus at, of course, is elections, right? Elections they call whatever they need. Public health, whatever they need. Assessors, whatever they need. Transportation, whatever they need. So those are the ones that do. And so when it comes down to money, those are the ones that are in the meetings where our finance manager is like, well, should we take money from GIS? They're like, nope, I need GIS. You can't take no money from them. So they are saying it, not me. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, right? You got the people that are in those meetings to stand up for you because they're not going to invite you in that meeting.
Right.
And I think that
Yeah.
most of the time,
Hierarchy, right? Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Wade.
I think you bring up a really good point, and that is that the other agencies that could be struggling from the lack of funding are basically facing a resource challenge. You know, what if it might be their own staff that is the resource constraint, or some capability that is their problem. And that's when I think as a GIS shop, you could say, well, what is it that we could do to give them more capacity to do work? And you can't really do that until you really understand how their work is currently being done. And you look for those things that I think we all as spatially oriented people and technologists say, now, why is it that you're using paper? Now, I know David. David's moved most of his organization away from paper. But that's just an example I throw out there as saying, you could provide more capacity to do work for those agencies that are struggling. And that's where your value ultimately comes in, and you get them to speak for you in terms of the value. So I think those are some of the things that help answer that question for David Murray is certainly let others speak your value for you. And I'm sure you've got tons of examples out there, David Murray, of ways that you added capacity or capabilities that did not exist before to help justify that you are not the business support system that they start cutting back on.
Correct. And then take advantage of Toby. You know, Toby, his company, the company that you were using, Tim, what was it called again? Blue
Raster.
Blue Raster, also Esri, right? Because at the end of the day, when you look at it, I just got a note today that said we are 15% up on taxes. So all this is happening. We are actually making money on taxes at the county. And everybody's like, wow, how is that happening? Because of those fees. You want to look at those fee generating departments. They are still making money. If you are not in there doing a great job of GIS with them, David Murray, that's where I would start. I would start with them, understanding their business, what they need, and what you can provide. You know, with these different companies, a lot of companies will do a POC for no charge. Can I get one of their highest, biggest priority items they're trying to solve, maybe do something in the field, get a POC going, show them, and then be like, hey, I would love to do some more of this, but I need like, you know, a half a person. And then don't ask for a actual body. And I tell the people this all the time. A lot of people want FTEs. FTE is a no-no. Ask for the money it costs to have an FTE. That's what I do. I look at calculate, ooh, for FTE is $84,000 of what I would apply for. That's what I asked for. Give me $84,000 this year. And they're like, oh, this one time? Yeah, that's all I need. Then I get the one time $84,000, do all that great work for that year, show them all the work and be like, hey, you want to keep doing this? Yes, I do. Give me another $84,000. I may go 2-3 years on $84,000 every year until they're like, you know what? Why don't we just give you a full-time person? Oh, thank you for suggesting that. So they suggested the person, not me, and then I get the person.
Beautiful.
You gotta know what's the caveats in your organization. There's certain no-nos to ask for the minute you bring it up. Like I said, they don't care who's bringing it up. They're not gonna give you an FTE. Be passing out, you know, dying and everything. Get the FTE.
Right.
But if you
right.
have the money, they will do that. And so that's one way of doing it. Also, one good way that I've noticed, put your GIS budget in other people's budget. Now, this one, you got to be careful, because if you do this and you fail on projects, you may not be working there no more. So that's the caveat. But a lot of my monies are in other people's budget. Because if I put it in public health budget, guess who has to approve that? The director of public health, not my CIO and nobody else. So I had to convince one person to give me money in their budget, and they'll put a line item, and when they put it in there, they won't ask questions about it because they're like, oh yeah, I know where that $30,000 is going towards. David's group is doing something for my office. So I only have one person to convince. So at the end of the day, my budget in IT may be a small budget, but then when you calculate all the money I got floating around in all the other department budget, I may have like the second largest budget.
Yeah, you're diversified.
Correct. So therefore, that's how they go back and they'll say, no, we're giving money to GIS to do this. And they're selling that at the higher level as well. So those are some of the strategies I've used over the years. Also, I'll tell you one last one. If you're in IT or any department, if your fiscal year is from like June to July, there becomes a point in, let's say, February, March, where there's money on the table that they didn't get spent. Now, everybody's a little different. In my case, it's usually around February, March. So I start now planning on the stuff I want to do, how much money I need. And I start planting the seed throughout my department. Hey, I'm going to need this amount of money. I'm going to need this. I'm going to need that. When it comes up, for them, because usually they'll do it. If you don't know about it, that means some other people know about it and they never told you. But this happens everywhere. When it comes up, they're like, okay, I got to spend this by June. Who has the best projects I want to spend it on? And then usually be right there with your one pager and say, boom, here's my project that's going to give you the most return. Give me 20K. All right. I've done that for the last 6 years and I've gotten money. I've gotten up to $250,000 because another division in my own department wasn't going to spend it, and we needed it for GIS, and I sold it, and we got the money, and it wasn't budget. It wasn't in the original budget. So that's what I'm saying is there's a lot of money floating around. You just got to know where it is and how to get your hands on it, and then just deliver.
Yep.
And I know GIS folks, you guys deliver, so you should have no problem.
Words of wisdom. Thank you so much, David. Thank you for being on our program, discussing the remote management topic today. We've surpassed our hour mark, and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Hey, David, how best can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, so definitely you can check me out on LinkedIn. I check that quite a bit for that. And but you also david.moss at maricopa.gov. You know, if I don't respond to the first email, hit me up again. Some days are worse than others. Yeah, but definitely try to communicate and help out any way I can. Yeah. You know, if you're trying to do a strategy or something and you need assistance or guidance, you know, definitely Toby's the man on that. But I can help you there as well. And awesome. Before we go, one thing I will say, I get this question asked a lot: which one is better, federated or centralized GIS? And I'll tell you this: it doesn't matter if you ain't got the right personnel and the right leadership. Both options will work. It all comes down to the leadership and the personnel. Yep. So if you're not good in those areas, it doesn't matter what organization structure you pick. They both gonna fail.
That's true. That is so true. Any last words there, Tim or Wade?
I thought this was fantastic. Thank you, David, for sharing some wisdom with us, and appreciate the time you've given us. Hopefully the audience got a lot out of it too.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. I really appreciated your perspective on many things. I think the one closing comment I would just have is that, you know, it seems like culture, our team culture is something that, you know, when we had a workplace, you know, back before COVID, culture was defined by all of us. And I think under the telework scenario, I think that maybe the GIS manager has to think that much more about the culture they want to create or maintain by virtue of how you choose to communicate with your team, how it's done, how often it's done, the channel you use to communicate with them, because there needs to be that bond of trust between a manager and his employees or her employees, and those are all done through communication. And as I think Tricia Brush explained very well during our leadership seminar, that doesn't happen by accident. Communication doesn't happen by accident, at least not the meaningful nature of communication that we need to produce effective teams. So give some thought to the culture you are creating and maintaining by virtue of how you choose to communicate in these remote times. So with that, I'll shut up.
Well said, Wade. Well said.
It's good.
All right, everybody. Thank you for attending, chatting, and watching all the way through. If you enjoyed this webinar, please take a screenshot and post it on your favorite social media and just put a hashtag GIS Peer Success. We'd really appreciate that. And replay will be available in a few days on YouTube, and you will get a reminder email from me since you are registered on this. And hopefully we'll try to slip another show in before the end of the year. But until next time, everybody, have a great Thanksgiving and stay safe. So we'll see you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.